Hello, my name is Victoria and I am a professional watercolor artist. I teach classes over Zoom weekly and monthly, so if you'd like to learn more about those, you can visit my website, which will be linked in this video. And in this video, I wanted to talk about the difference between supplies. So on the right here, this is quite an old tube. It was gifted to me. It's about as old as I am, of Winsor Newton Alizarin Crimson, and you can just barely make that out anymore. So these paints last a long time if you keep them capped. They will not go bad. And then I have the Winsor Newton Cotman. So both are alizarin crimson, both are made by Winsor Newton. Just for reference here, I'm going to show this is one of the newer tubes styles that Winsor Newton makes as of, currently when this video is being made. So we're going to have two different paints, same color, same brand. One is professional, one is student grade. Additionally, in our little test here, we're going to have three papers, starting out with the least costing paper, Artist Loft, and I have labeled where I'm going to put the Cotman and the professional paint. So this is the least expensive. Then we have Canson, which is a little more expensive. Again, Cotman, professional, labeled. And then Arches paper. This is professional watercolor paper. And I think you're going to see through this video why I recommend getting the professional watercolor paint and the Arches paper. So let's get started. First off, we will start with the Artist Loft paper. And we're going to do the Cotman swatch first. And I'm just going to do this in the wet on wet style. So I got a little section wet. And now I'm getting my paint. And as far as, in my opinion, not professional grade paint goes, Cotman is not terrible. There is definitely worse. I'm having to do a few a few coats here to get this to be as vibrant. So Cotman is not terrible. It's not chalky, which is really what I mean by not terrible. Sometimes you'll get paint that just feels like you're painting with chalk, and Cotman doesn't do that, but when you see me do the professional paint, you will definitely see a difference. So while that is drying, I'm just going to go ahead. I've rinsed my brush off. And I am getting the professional swatch side wet. Let's get that out of the glare. And one stroke of the professional paint is already much more vibrant than the Cotman is. Okay, we are going to let that dry. I'm going to move that off the screen, and we are going to repeat this on the Canson and the Arches paper. I will do a scrub test with all of them. So that is meaning how well does the paper handle being messed with? How many strokes can you do on it before you start to rip it? And that is the identifying factor in good quality paper. So we're going to do the same thing. Start out with Cotman. And in my experience, the Artist Loft and the Cotman paper, it doesn't really accept the paint very easily. Coming back over it with, like, say, another wash of color, it comes up the layers underneath. And, sometimes we do need to get a layer of paint up, but not all the time. So it's not helpful when your paint is just sitting on top of the paper and not being absorbed. And that's what I see with these two brands. Now, Canson is much more durable than the Artist Loft, as you're going to see in a moment, but neither of these compare to the Arches paper. So again, the Professional brand is just much more vibrant. Okay, we're gonna set this off to the side and let that dry, and repeat this one last time on the Arches paper swatch. Okay, and then the Professional. All right, now this is the paper that I use in my own work when I'm teaching classes, so this is definitely my favorite paper. Winsor Newton makes a nice paper that I have recently tried, but I really do like the Arches, and it's hot press paper, so let me just talk about that really quick while we're waiting for the other ones to dry. This is very smooth. This does not have the normal texture that watercolor paper is known for. This is the Artist Loft, and you can see it's a little more bumpy. There is definitely cold press paper that is more bumpy than the Artist Loft one that I just showed, but that's just a personal preference that I like this hot press paper. I encourage you to try both and see what you prefer, but for me, I really do like the hot press paper more. Okay, so we're gonna put that one off to the side and just revisit our Artist Loft paper. So for some reason that left side is not all the way dry, but it is fine for a little experiment here. I'll start on the Professional side. So what I'm doing is what I call scrubbing, and I'm coming in and I'm disturbing this paper. I'm trying to lift the pigment. Now maybe it's because when I'm painting I make a mistake and I need to lift that up. Maybe I went too dark with something. But also this shows just coming over this a second time, say with more alizarin crimson or a different color. Do you see that this paper is already ripping? And I'm not doing that very hard at all. So I'm just actually going to really go pretty hard there. And I have little pulp bits of paper in my brush. It lifted. It's not going to get back to the original, but so this is not very fun to work with. So let's just scrub up this side really quick. And again, I can go really, really hard on that and rip the paper. the arches paper that I'm going to show right after the Canson, that does not happen with it. So if you are painting and this is happening, you're ripping your paper, it might not be you, it might be the paper. So that's the Artist Loft. Let's switch on over to the Canson and do the same little test. Okay, so it's not ripping as easily as the Artist Loft. Oh, but as I'm doing that a little bit more, it's starting to come up. So this paper, both of those papers don't have much workability. This one definitely has more than the Artist Loft paper. And if I really, really try, I can start ripping it. So better, but still not amazing. And I'm going to run all of these through one more test. So you'll see that in just a second. And back to the arches. So I can go back and forth, and nothing is ripping. In fact, the paint itself isn't coming up as easily either, which is fine. We're never going to get it back to the way it was, but the reason that it came off so easily of the other papers is that the paper didn't have a lot of hold on it. So you can do this on this arches, go really, really hard on it, and it's not going to really rip. And you can see the Professional does not come up as easy. It's more pigmented. Now that's not to say that we can't do something about it, but this is going to accept more layers much, much easier than the other paint papers will. And so the teeny tiny bits of pulp actually are from the previous papers. They're kind of trapped in my brush. So if you did see a little bit of a pulp, it's not from this. It's from my brush keeping the other bits. Okay, so let's do one more round of tests. Let's come back to Artist Loft. And what I'm going to do is use a Mr. Clean magic eraser. Definitely make sure that you're getting one that doesn't have any solvents in it. So I just rip off a tiny, tiny little piece. And so I tell people to do this trick when something's happened, like a mistake, and they need to lift something up. You definitely can rip the arches paper this way, but you have to really, really try, because this is slightly abrasive. So what I do is I get it just wet enough so that it's not dripping. And remember, this is the Artist Loft paper. Look at that. That just completely, that is a little piece of paper pulp hanging off of that. We don't want that. That will not make your painting look nice. Okay, so we're just going to see the Canson now. So again, making sure that it's not really wet, because then you just have a lot of stuff everywhere. Okay, now some of this is actually just, well, just a little bit of it is the magic eraser. I think that little bit is. But you can see here that's starting to rip this paper. Not as bad as the Artist Loft, because again, that one is just a little bit more expensive. But the last little test here will be on the arches. Okay, again, some of this is just the little melamine sponge. But that did work and it really did not disturb this paper. If I did keep going, I can, but I don't want to. And you're not going to do that purposefully. But the other brands just couldn't even handle a little bit of a gentle scrubbing. So that is the major difference in quality. So I always recommend the Winsor Newton Professional paints. Holbein, Daniel Smith, those are also good brands. Really anything that says professional watercolor paint is what you want. If anything, just because this Cotman is not as pigmented as the Professional, so everything is going to look a little more dull and not as rich. And it's really only a couple of dollars in price difference per tube. So definitely something to think about. And as you can see, I've gathered these supplies throughout my time painting, so I do have them. But it's good to know the difference. So that is what I highly recommend: Arches paper and Winsor Newton Professional watercolor paints. Thank you so much for watching.